Welcome back to the Legal Smith Unleashed. I'm attorney Kurt Smith with Smith Legal Group, here today with Eric Humes, a real estate broker extraordinaire here in Las Vegas, Nevada, one of the top realtors in the state, if not the country, if not the world. Hey, welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That seems to be, if I'm not mistaken, a Golden Knights hat.
That it is. I'm supporting the local team tonight, so we're looking for another W. Playoff season is here. We've had great success in previous playoff seasons.
Game 2 with the Golden Knights against the Minnesota Wild. Here's my hope, and I hate to be a downer for everybody. I want to win tonight. I want to drop one in Minnesota so that on Game 5 we can come back and win, and we can give Marc-Andre Fleury a good send-off for his last professional game ever.
Oh, that would be phenomenal.
Wouldn't that be great?
That would be.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. And so we just need to drop one in Minnesota. It'll give it to him, right? It'll be a little bit of a gimme. But we're not really here to talk about the Golden Knights tonight, although we probably could for quite some time.
We could.
I don't know if you heard Friday, just last Friday, which is what, the 18th?
18th of April, yep.
There's a story out of the Bronx, New York. They found a mom with 2 kids. Mom is wheelchair bound. She's got 2 kids, 10 and 4, I believe, 8 and 4. As the story goes, they found mom dead. The 8-year-old boy was dead. The 4-year-old girl was alive.
Wow.
Okay? Now, fascinating story because, she lived kind of more in a project area back in the Bronx. And, as you talk to the neighbors are saying, well, hey, back on the 24th of March, we noticed that, she wasn't really coming out anymore. And there was a package left on her door that just sat there for weeks. And we heard cries from the little girl coming from inside the apartment and just seemed to never stop. And, we were friends, and now it turns out that mom had been dead for a couple weeks. The son had been dead for a couple weeks. The 4-year-old, as the story goes, got by because she found some chocolate, and she would just eat the chocolate, but then she would cry.
Yeah.
Now, the lady had some neighbors that were friendly with her, although maybe she was a little bit annoying because she was, I don't know, it seemed like, as I listened to the neighbors, she seemed to be kind of the person that would call and always want to whine a little bit about what was going on in life. But she had family, okay? And the family hadn't heard from her in a few weeks. Mom in the wheelchair with the special needs son and the 4-year-old. And so they did what any good family would do. They went over and saw her, right?
No.
They called the police and said, hey, why don't you do a welfare check on mom? And the police do what the police do, which is they went over and knocked on the door. Nobody answered. And so they left. And the family, got nervous after another little while, and after another week or so, call the police and CPS out again. Everybody goes out and knocks on the door. Nobody's there. And nobody answers the door, although I'm assuming we've still got a 4-year-old crying behind the door, right?
We do.
And nobody comes.
It most likely, though, was a metal door in the Bronx and the projects. A lot of times those are commercial doors.
Okay.
And they're metal doors. So, through the walls, actually get better sound than actually out through the front door.
Okay. But there's walls right next to the door, right?
True.
So, you're hearing a sound. I've never met a door that was soundproof.
Correct.
Have you?
It takes a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort, and I don't think that much effort goes into the doors and the projects, right?
Correct.
So it turns out that the mom and the 8-year-old had been dead for weeks.
It's crazy.
We've got a 4-year-old that somehow survived. They think the 8-year-old starved to death because he was special needs and couldn't really do much without mom's help. And the 4-year-old found the chocolate and was able to survive that way. The parents did one thing correctly. It was a dad and a sister, I believe. And when they finally figured out what was going on, they called again. I guess this is the third time, and somehow the police got in, whether that was with the landlord's help or whatever the case may be, and they ran in, grabbed the 4-year-old, and took off. Now, listen, that's what you got to do, okay? Because whether you know it or not, and look, CPS, Child Protective Services, is a fantastic organization. They're the best one we have for kids. They're also a horrible organization because they don't always get it right. And nobody wants CPS involved in their lives. Because they make you jump through a lot of hoops, right? And let's assume we've got the same situation, okay? And in my office, we handle a lot of CPS cases, okay? And what'll happen in this type of a situation is CPS comes in, they see a dead mom, they see a dead brother, they've got a 4-year-old, and they're going to take custody of the 4-year-old. They then take the 4-year-old down to Child Haven, which is juvie, right? And now the 4-year-old's under protective custody at Child Haven, and now we've got to find a suitable family member to come take this kid. And obviously we don't want Uncle Molester taking the kid, right? And certainly they've got to check up on that. But realistically, if we can't find the most suitable person, they're going to keep that kid and they're going to farm the kid out to foster parents. And then trying to get the child back can be a real nightmare.
Yeah, I have a friend who works in another child organization, and she's shared a couple of those nightmare experiences, both from families, family members, parents gone astray. So.
It's really not the best place to be. But a lot of people, when they find a situation, or they worry, and look, as a neighbor, right? I'm now the neighbor for whatever child this is. In fact, listen, when I first moved to town here to Vegas, I guess it was when I first moved back to Vegas, I used to live in this house, and it was next to this retaining wall. So mine was like the last house on the block, and then next to me was like this 20-foot retaining wall. On the other side, it wasn't 20 foot, but on my side, it was. Yeah. And we'd get paper airplanes thrown over the wall, and we'd get the airplanes, and it would have kids writing on it saying, "Please help me."
Wow. Yeah.
And we'd hear stuff coming from over the wall, and we called Child Protective Services a number of times because what else are you going to do, right? And so as the neighbor, that's all you can really do. Call the police, call Child Protective Services, hope for the best, right?
Yeah, a lot of times in my business, I end up being that person like a week later. Like what happens after the coroners came, like nobody comes and like cleans the house. No one comes and like they remove the bodies and that's it. And we talk about that door a little bit. Like no one's repairing the door. Like I go in, we take care of the property, and the front door, the back door's completely broke open. Casings are broke through. Here, most often, it's actually the fire department that's doing the well checks, and the fire department that's breaking down that door. And in order to do that, they just smash through the door and the casings, and so then then I have to come in. We have to secure the property and get that settled, and then a lot of it is a little bit of hazmat removal. Removing articles or part of the flooring that may be stained in a certain way. That you don't want to walk into. Right. So actually, I just put one in escrow tonight that on our way over here. For a house that the occupant had fell down, and it took a couple of days for the neighbors to.
And listen, what the buyer doesn't know, can't hurt them, right?
Right.
Yeah, you don't disclose that stuff, right?
State of California, you disclose whether someone. Actually, this one, I think she fell down, but the neighbors were actually super attentive. Yeah. And she ended up passing away at the hospital. But she had been there for probably at least 12 hours. So
Horrible, horrible, horrible. But look, as the family member, okay, look, as family members, we know if we've got family members with needs, right? I've got some family members in need. None of them really live here. But in this case, in the case we're talking about from back in the Bronx, I believe the dad and the sister lived fairly close. It wasn't like a 6-hour drive, right? It was fairly close, but instead of just coming by themselves, they're relying on the police or relying on CPS to come by and do the check. And what's the problem with that?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of sad stories where families actually, I had one case, like, the premise that you're making is like, hey, I'm not saying that they don't care, but what I'm saying is, like, I had one case where the daughter, like the mother was going into long-term care, and the daughter came out. We took care of the personal property, took care of the house, and then she's like, all I want is my dad's ashes. Can you send that to me? I'm like, hey, are you going to come back out? Are you going to visit your mom? And she said, no, if you could do that, that would be great. I'm like, I'm a complete stranger, but I do have a kind heart. I'll go by and see your mom maybe once a quarter, maybe. But
you're not dating her at this point, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
And so I have lots of stories like that where under the premise of like, a family member should be taken care of, or hey, stop in, let's check on our family members. But a lot of times it's actually pretty sad I just had one case close where there was 3 siblings. There was one sibling taking care of mom and dad. Mom passed away, then she was taking care of dad passed away, and they're like, well, hey, who are these other siblings? She's like, I haven't seen them. She's like 3 of them I've never met in my life. And I'm like, well, where have they been to help take care of dad? Like, where have they been? Like, she's like, not around. And I can testify because I was brought in to start like help managing things.
Preach.
And I'm like, I haven't met a single family member of yours. Yeah. And she's like, I know. And so, but now, like, going into that, I think you actually worked on the guardianship for that. Mm-hmm. Was, she was brought in to help take care of her dad. And, and now we're looking at, she was taking care of her dad on full time. And I know in the state of Nevada, there is some balance to that. There is some recompense.
Sure. So, and that those are all true things. But as the family member, like, what your relative's car looks like, probably. Like, if the car's home, if you're knocking on the door and you've got a niece or a grandchild in there, that's their voice, right? And it would be pretty weird if mom wasn't around, but the 4-year-old sitting there crying. You're listening for that kind of stuff, where the police are like, oh, is that coming from this house or some other house? Or they don't know. They don't know the circumstances as well as you do. So as a family member, if you've got that type of a situation, number one, go, right? Take a Sunday drive and go over to the family member's house and see what's going on, especially if there's little kids involved. And number two, don't be afraid to kick the door in, right? Or go see the super and say, hey, can I'm really worried, can we at least take a little peek? Because, the problem may be, hey, I got to fix a door jamb, right? Which is
$100.
$100. As opposed to, hey, my 4-year-old niece may be starving to death inside because I haven't heard from the mom in at least 3 weeks.
True. And I also think, it sounds like a case of estrangement. I just got another one where I was talking to a family member and they literally hadn't talked to his sister in over 8 years. Mm-hmm. Like, last time he saw his sister was at a funeral, and they had no idea whether she had passed away or not. Right. It breaks my heart.
Sure.
It breaks my heart. But yeah, anytime there's like kids, and especially special needs, that would just be, I think what you're talking about is like the cost of your time, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you're a distant family member, go over and check on your someone in need. So
let's take this example. Okay, we've got this example, and let's pretend that we've got a normal relationship, and we've got dad.
So we're ahead of the game.
We are way ahead of the game.
Normal
relationship, and we've got dad who is worried about his special needs daughter with a special needs grandkid, and I don't know how special needs the 4-year-old is, if at all, right?
Right.
Maybe we've got a Forrest Gump baby coming on that's really smart, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, look, we rely on CPS, but there's a flip side to the CPS argument, which is a guardianship. If you are concerned that your wheelchair-bound daughter is unable to adequately take care of the kids, and right? If you go over and the kids are always filthy, and the 4-year-old sitting in her own feces because she doesn't get changed, and there's emaciation of the children, or there's bugs, or there's whatever the case may be, you can certainly call CPS on your own family, okay? Which, again, that's doable, and CPS will come in, remove the children, and now you've got to fight with them to get the kids back, perhaps.
Yeah.
And if you've got some kind of a criminal record, or you've got, a child that lives with you that might, have some problems with the law, CPS is going to step in and say, no, you can't take this 4-year-old who really needs the help. We'll take him, we'll find some foster parents. Or the alternative is file for a guardianship, okay? Now, there's a number of names for that. For juveniles, we call it guardianship. For adults in Nevada, we call that adult guardianship. But some places call it a conservatorship, okay? Kind of like
Britney Spears.
Britney Spears had a conservatorship. Or who's the football guy from... whatever. So... they made the movie about Sandra Bullock.
That's right. They had for the left tackle. Blindside.
The Blindside, right? The conservatorships, right?
Right.
And we can argue about whether those were good or not, and whether Brittany needed to be freed, or whether Michael got taken advantage of. That's not really what we're talking about here. For adults, it's possible to come in and say, listen, my adult child or friend or spouse or brother or sister, they need help, and I'm willing to step in and do the help. Now, how much help do they need? I don't know, right? Maybe they need a full-time live-in. Maybe they need to come live with you. Maybe you're going to take a child away from the wheelchair-bound mom who really can't care for the child anymore, potentially. I'm not saying all wheelchair-bound people can't care for people, but if you are the family member that's in that situation, please file for a guardianship. I like to call guardianship kind of the civil end, or the flip side of the CPS coin, right? CPS, you're getting the government involved, and you're saying, hey, government, you take over. I'm not getting involved. I'm not doing it. Or maybe you want to get involved, but you think CPS is the right way to go. But you can file for a guardianship just as easily. The guardianship, they're going to be looking for criminal activity as well, but they're not really as stringent as the CPS people are. And you can give the help that you were looking for fairly easily.
Can we talk about the economics of guardianship? Like, what if I'm afraid that I can't afford taking in this child family member, or what if I can't afford to bring mom and dad into my house? What if I'm like paycheck to paycheck?
Well, if you can't, then you can't, but you find somebody who can, right? Guardianship there is adult protective services or child protective services that can come in and step in and find a foster parent, find somebody to help out. And in those types of situations, which is one of the benefits for CPS, there are compensatory measures, checks that can be gotten for taking these children in. So that's one of the benefits. And
awesome.
There are also some other benefits on the CPS side, because they can get you services if you need them. Help finding a job, counseling resources, drug addiction resources, things of that nature. So if you've got a parent who's drug addicted, right, or who is down on it. They're not working, and now they can't find a job because they got 5 kids sitting at home. And what are they going to? I can either leave the kids home alone, or I can go find a job. CPS works wonders with that type of a situation if the family can't.
So if you're a guardian, do you have access to like a social worker or someone that's like helping you out, like maybe educating you, or is there any training? Like, what does it involve?
So guardians know, okay, and that's if you talk to the guardianship judges, they feel a little jaded because they don't have the same resources that they have on the CPS side, the government end. So the government end has all those types of resources. But let's assume you're some extremely wealthy real estate broker here in town that's got hair like David Letterman, right? And
most people don't even know who David Letterman is.
No, they know who he is. He's the
archives. They're going into archives.
He's the Rasputin-looking guy with the big long beard, right?
Yeah.
But and you've got a family member who needs help, or a child that's being neglected, or a child that might be being abused. You don't need the help, right? You don't need monetary assistance from the state. If the state were to give somebody like you an extra $1,000, you would spit on that. You would say, I make this in an hour just selling real estate here in Las Vegas. I don't need the state's paltry $1,000 a month, right? Whereas there are some family in town that would love to step in and help, but they don't have access to those resources and they need the help.
Yeah.
So there is help available if you're willing to go through the process, if you're willing to sign up and be the foster parent, if you're willing to go through the government hoops and qualify for those types of benefits. But maybe they're rich like you and they don't need those types of benefits, and so they just somebody like you.
I think you mean the middle class like me.
No, the wealthy people like you, but not like you, because these people would actually care, right? And so they'd come in and they'd go in with their family member and they would actually ask for the guardianship, right? And say, Judge, I will step in. And look, it's not always easy, okay? I mean, I've had several recent cases where a recent one I can think of is we've got a friend who stepped in to help her friend, and the friend had a extremely special needs child, like nonverbal, and non-ambulatory, and non-potty trained, and 9 years old, and the friend stepped in. And and said, look, let me help you. Now, turns out the mom didn't want the help. I'm doing just fine on my own.
Right.
No, you're not. Okay, because the kid's 9 and has all these problems, and you haven't gotten him into the speech therapy, and you haven't gotten him into the occupational therapy, and you haven't gotten him into the physical therapy, and you haven't done what it takes to potty train your child.
Is there a legal baseline for like standard of care for a parent in Clark County?
It's kind of like pornography, right? You'll know it when you see it, right?
Yeah.
I can't define it. I can't define abuse. Well, I can define abuse, pretty easily, the extreme abuse. But how about not so extreme abuse, or how about neglect, right?
Right.
I don't know that I can define it just by, you're looking for what? I don't know. But when you see it, right?
Okay.
And usually it's not the stranger, right? It's not the lady driving down the street that's like, that's a neglected child. You know what? Let me go grab that kid and I'm going to file for a guardianship. That's called kidnapping. Please don't do that, okay? But let's say there's a child in your life, a niece, a nephew,
close friend,
right? And you've got to do something. I did another guardianship. It's been a minute now, but the family sent it was the child. They adopted a child of a friend that couldn't take the child anymore, and it turned out the child got sexually abused by their son.
No.
So, and they adopted the girl. So now it's brother, sister, right? Brother,
Yeah.
adopted sister. So they sent the daughter out to live with her uncle and aunt out here in Vegas. And the uncle and aunt took the child in, and we'll just keep her for a year, see how things go. And as the child's out here, and it turns out that the adoptive parents didn't know about the sexual abuse, but she disclosed it to the aunt and uncle and was like, oh, by the way, I can't ever go back there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm being abused by this, my brother.
Yeah, sibling.
And so the aunt and uncle, who are now the, kind of de facto guardians, right, filed for an actual guardianship and said, look, we can't let this child go back. Now, imagine how thrilled adoptive mom and dad were to learn that, number one, this guy's brother is now accusing him of being essentially a neglectful parent.
Right.
And number two, that their son has sexually abused his adoptive sister or a minor in their home,
Yeah.
which is something they don't want to deal with at all, right? And
Worst case scenario.
and so rather than admit that this is what's going on, they fought him. They fought him tooth and nail. And but the child was 14 and able to speak for herself.
Yeah.
And she got an attorney. She was appointed an attorney, the child was, and was able to tell the attorney, I'm not going back. And we got that in front of the judge, and the judge is like, yeah, you're not going back. That's the difference that you can do with a guardianship, because right? Now, let's take CPS, for example, because we know it when we see it. If I call CPS and I say, and this is what happened with me when I'm calling on my neighbor, right?
Right.
I'm calling CPS and I say, hey, there's abuse going on or neglect, because I'm getting these paper airplanes that say, please help me. I'm being hurt.
Right.
CPS goes over, knock, knock, and take a look around. Oh, 4 walls, a ceiling. I see a bed. It's on the floor. There's no sheets, but it's still a bed, right? And well, there's food in the pantry. Sure, it's crumbs and cookies, but I guess we're okay. That's kind of the level of standard that CPS is looking for. Is there an imminent danger? No. Is that how I would like my child raised? No. But is there a danger? Or let's say that there's abuse, right? And so the child will come in and say, I'm being abused by dad.
Right.
And they go up to dad and they say, hey, dad, is it true you're abusing your child? And dad says, no, that's nonsense. And the CPS will go, well, I've got conflicting stories, so we're going to do what's called unsubstantiate this case.
Well, is that where, like, maybe if the child was in school, is that where you see a lot of cases? Like, if there's a teacher that's noticing different patterns, different marks on children, does the teachers reach out? Is that through the school district or through CPS?
Okay, well, the school will reach out to CPS, right? Because the teachers, doctors, nurses, even attorneys in a lot of cases are mandatory reporters. So if the child says, I've been abused, they've got to report that to CPS. But then CPS does the investigation, and even if the child is credible,
right,
they go to the parent and say, did this happen? If there's no marks, if there's no indicia that this has happened, CPS is kind of powerless. But as a relative, you are not, right? You can take this to the guardianship court, and the guardianship court, which differs from CPS, is not, I'm here to stop an imminent danger. Their job is to protect the child based on the facts that we have. And if we have to have a trial and we go in and the child comes in and says, you did it, the guardianship court is likely going to believe them, where in a CPS scenario, it probably won't even get that far.
Yeah, it sounds like the CPS is more like a survivability issue versus guardianship, it sounds like, is the well-being of the child.
You could put it that way. If that helps you, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, that's what I mean. Just layman terms. Over here, take care of what's the best interest. Better raising, better opportunities. in the long term, but our emotional, mental health, physical health, or our resources are spread so thin, this is our baseline.
Right.
Like, hey, are they getting by? They're getting by. That's all we need to know.
That's all we need to know. Well, looks like we have come to the end of another fantastic Legal Smith Unleashed. Eric, I really appreciate you coming in.
I appreciate you having me.
It was very informational to know how much realtors get involved in the CPS process, and probably ought to be looked at a little bit more thoroughly. But we'll see you next time on the Legal Smith Unleashed.
Thanks.